Welcome back, everybody, for our last segment of 7.1 SPS 7A3, in which we're going to talk about the connection between industrialization and imperialization. And what we're really focused on here is that there's a connection to rising imperialism and colonialism as industrialization is growing because of a desire for markets and materials. So basically, as demand for industrial products increases and as places expanded industrialization, they needed both more raw materials in order to produce things and new markets to sell those finished products. Industrial inventions like the steamship and the Maxim guns, as well as medical advances like finally listening to Native Americans in South America who have been using the bark of the Quinchoncha, I cannot pronounce it correctly, a tree that grows in Latin America, in order to fight fevers. They use that to distill what's called quinine, which is used then to combat malaria and yellow fever. So those things combined made imperialism and colonization much easier than it had previously been in parts of the world like Africa and parts of Asia that had previously been able to keep Europeans out because they couldn't sustain against the diseases there. Now all of a sudden, we have new technologies and new medicine that make that possible. So we start to see a shift and a growing imperialization happening in reaction to growing industrialization. So kind of the gist of this, as far as the market side of it goes, is that many non-European and non-Western countries were seen as potential areas for both exploitation of raw materials and the creation of new markets for manufactured goods. It is important to note, though, that this is only part of what drove colonization and imperialization in Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. There were other things going on as well, but industrialization and that desire for materials and markets is a big factor, especially in what is called the second wave of imperialization. So, a little bit of background. Latin America and the Caribbean were areas that had been colonized since the 16th and 17th centuries. And in some cases had been continued to be held as colonies as long as possible. And in some cases that was well into the 1800s. But in the early 1800s and the late 1700s, a lot of different colonies in the Americas, including the United States, or what became the United States, fought for and won their independence against Europeans. And that led to European power starting to look elsewhere for potential colonies where they could get raw materials and new markets. Now, there's a lot of background I could give you on this, and you guys might remember from last year the term mercantilism, which is the idea that a colonizing power needs a colony in order to exploit it, both by getting raw materials from it and then selling their stuff back to that colony. That's the whole point of colonies, according to mercantilism. And that drove a lot of what was going on economically until capitalism, which then kind of made things worse in some ways, but they still wanted the materials and they still wanted the markets. It's just that colonies start to shift a little bit into other things as well. But anyway, again, that's stuff that you guys will get in world history. But Europeans, because they kind of have to, start to shift their attention to other areas of the world, which led to the second wave of imperialism that happened in the 1800s, which targeted Africa and Asia, where they did essentially the same thing that they had done with mercantilism by making their colonies produce raw materials for the home country and absorb products from the home country without really producing their own industries. And in the case of some, having their pre-existing industries either suppressed or destroyed. But there's some other stuff going on there too. There's a desire to, quote unquote, civilize people, which is so problematic, yet that was a driving force for Europeans. As well as just, the power politics of being able to say, I have a bigger empire. So there's a lot going on there, but economics is a really big part of it. Now, some industrial countries were producing a surplus of manufactured goods and needed somewhere that they could sell them. This kind of gets into that market piece. And in some cases, the products they were making were not sellable to their own populations, either because they had hit a saturation point, like everybody who wanted to buy the thing had already bought the thing, or because the quality of it was not so great and their own people didn't want it. So they turned to other countries where they thought they could sell their products. And colonies became a really big focal point for that, in the sense that you could force them to buy your stuff if you were their colonizer. And you could do that by destroying their own industries. And in some cases, that's exactly what happened. For some manufacturers, the countries that had local industries of their own produced a significantly higher quality product than the industrial countries who wanted to sell stuff to them. And this was true in the case of India. Again, you'll hear about this in world history too, but in India, there had been a very, very long history of very high quality cotton textiles for literally hundreds of years. And the Europeans, as well as other parts of the world, were obsessed with Indian cotton. And we're just like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's so pretty and it's so soft and it's, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So Indian cotton was very, very, very highly sought after. And the Europeans roll in and are like, hey, can we introduce you in, or can we interest you in our not so great cotton? And the Indian people are like, no, yours is terrible. Have you seen ours? And the Europeans are like, yes, and we're jealous. So what ends up happening is that Britain, over the course of about 100 years or so, finds some sneaky ways to get a toehold in India. They start taking over areas and getting, building relationships with local rulers and, that kind of thing. And then after a while, they're able to actually disrupt the economy in India and the textile industry and force the people of India to start producing raw cotton, but not actually the textiles anymore. And so then all that raw cotton goes to England and is produced into textiles that are not as good, but then they can force them to buy it. So really not so great in terms of ethics. And there's a lot I'm skipping over, but that is one of the things that happened in India. There are a lot of other things that Europe did, specifically England, that is real bad. But you'll learn more about that next year or on your own if you decide to do some Googling. Any hoozle. The kind of gist of it is that colonies gave home countries, the colonizers, somewhere that they could sell inferior products or excess products and be assured that they would be bought, which improved the economy of the colonizers, but not the economy of the colonized, which is one of the reasons that places that used to be colonies tend to have a suppressed economy, is because the colonizers did it on purpose, because they're big jerk faces and selfish. Again, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but not that much. All right, that is it for units, or for 7.1. And I will see you guys later. If you have questions about any of this, let me know. Adios.